Hello and welcome to the DraftKings Daily Trot. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Scott Mayo. I got Sports 25 to life, and hopefully tonight the Aces actually pitch well, unlike most of the Aces in the last few nights. Steven Strasburg excluded, I should say. But tonight the big debate's going to be, well, I guess there's three guys in consideration depending on who you ask: Chris Sale, Chris Archer, David Price. You got Sale against Boston, Chris Archer at home against Minnesota, David Price at Texas. I think for me, it's slightly Chris Sale, but I think Chris Archer is a close second for me because that Minnesota team on the road is just awful.
Yeah, especially against righties. I agree with you. He's a little bit pricey for me, though. I don't mind Price either. Like you said, all three of these guys are pretty good options. Being a lefty against Texas, you got to feel pretty good about. But in Texas with an 8.5 run over/under, I mean, it's not ideal, that's for sure. But he is a nice amount cheaper than Archer and Sale on DraftKings, so definitely worth considering. Boston's been a much better hitting team than Minnesota. I definitely prefer Sale just as far as going deep into games and stuff like that. I think I prefer Sale as a cash game play, Archer as a GPP play. That's going to be the way I'm going. I think Sale will be a little bit higher owned.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And I mean, like you said, he has been pitching deeper, and I mean, he does have 29 strikeouts in the last 14 innings he's pitched, so certainly has the massive upside as well.
Yeah.
And then other guys to consider, I mean, you can look at Johnny Cueto at home against Baltimore. They do strike out a ton. He's coming off of a pretty bad performance at Boston, but certainly don't expect that because he's been great in every other start since going over to Kansas City. So $10,400 though. I still feel like he's more of a tournament play for me because Baltimore does have some power. I just don't love the price. I think I'd much rather pay for those top two guys instead. And then as you look in the middle, I think the first guy that I'm looking at, and you really don't feel great about these guys, Justin Verlander has been pitching really well, $8,200. The Angels are still struggling. You know, you had Albert Pujols hit a 3-run homer in the first inning last night. Nobody did a whole lot after that, really. So, I mean, this is still a team that's just not very explosive on offense, and Verlander's only given up one earned run in his last three starts.
Yeah, he's definitely been much better lately. He seems like he's getting comfortable again, which is good. Has been showing off a little bit of strikeout upside, too. He's had, 14, 22, 27, 37 strikeouts over the last 5 games. So that's pretty solid, averaging just under 1 per inning, it looks like. One over 1 per inning. So, I mean, he's a pretty solid play. At the same price, though, I like Gio Gonzalez quite a bit against San Diego. They're a little bit better against lefties, but they've been pretty bad overall. I think they're dead last in WOBA against righties since the All-Star break. They've been just a little bit better against lefties. At 7,500, that's a pretty good price. I'm not a huge Gio Gonzalez fan, but now that he's sitting there at 7,500, I feel a little bit better. I'm not like super excited about it still, but it's a pretty good situation. 7-run over/under, -160 favorite. Washington really needs to win games right now, and the offense has come around a little bit now that they started getting people healthy. So he's a guy I'm definitely going to mix in cash games. I think I feel a little bit better upside-wise about Verlander, though.
Yeah, and I agree with you on Gonzalez. Not a guy that I love, but is a good spot. And like you said, I mean, they finally have that offense together. They should be able to score some runs. Other guys to consider, there's really not many cheap. I know Brett Anderson is always like kind of a fallback guy for a lot of people. I don't particularly like him ever. I mean, he's only $6,000, but he's facing a team that doesn't strike out much against lefties. They have a lot of power against lefties. Small ballpark. If this game was in LA, I would definitely feel a lot better about it, but I think he's okay at $6K.
Yeah.
I still am considering Patrick Corbin for my GPPs. I know he was awful in his last start, but I mean, this is a guy that has massive upside, and St. Louis still as a whole struggles with lefties. I mean, we've been saying the last couple of days they haven't struggled much during those games, but he definitely, when he gets it going, I mean, he's got massive strikeout upside.
Yeah, definitely. Not a ton else I like as far as pitcher goes. I mean, Rick Porcello's back in the rotation facing the White Sox today. Not super excited about that with him facing off with Sale, but I mean, it's a decent guy at 5,200. It's kind of hard to argue with if you want to go really cheap. And then Cody Anderson against Milwaukee is only 5,000. He's a -140 favorite. Tomlin was okay yesterday, not great. Gave up a couple home runs to Lucroy, which hurt him. Outside of that, he pitched pretty well, and as usual, the Milwaukee lineup wasn't very good. Anderson's another guy coming off an injury, though, so just keep an eye on him. That's probably the last two guys I would use in terms of cheap ones. And then I'd probably stick to the guys we've mentioned already if I'm going above that.
Yeah, there's only one more guy I'm going to mention, and you don't feel great about him, but he has pitched well. Tyler Duffy, $4,600. He's got over 27 DraftKings points each of his last two starts.
Yeah.
We know Tampa Bay killing lefties, not so great against righties. Certainly don't expect him to get the win with Archer opposing him, but at $4,600, you don't need the win. You just need the guy to go 5 innings, get you a couple strikeouts, and pay out that salary.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, catcher options for tonight. Travis d'Arnaud batted 8th last night, but still had himself a solid game. So I think he's still a tournament option against Jared Eichhoff, who pitched well in his first start, but from all the things I'm reading, he's not supposed to be a tremendous talent. He's not a highly touted prospect, so he's a guy that you expect isn't going to just dominate once again. Other guys, Buster Posey is still really cheap. He's been really struggling, but $3,700, I think he makes for a really good tournament option because much like a lot of these other good hitters we were talking about, guys like Jason Kipnis last night where he said he's much better than this. He's going to have his big game. Tonight could be that game with him. But then once again, your punt play. Seems like there's a bunch of punt plays that are the same as last night. But John Jaso, once again, $3,100. Batted cleanup last night, which was great for his RBI potential. So I think at $3,100, he's going to be my cash game play.
Yeah, Derek Norris at $2,900 against Gio Gonzalez. If you're not using him, Norris has been pretty solid against lefties still lately. I don't mind going back to Jonathan Lucroy while he's seeing the ball well. Cody Anderson, not a guy that really scares me, although he's been pretty solid when he's been in the starting rotation this season. Kyle Schwarber, I think, is a fine upside play even against PV. Outside of that, I'm probably going to look at cheap punt guys again at catcher. There'll be a couple out there. I'm not sure who I am really excited about yet, but I think Jaso and probably Posey are the two guys I'm going to be using the most.
Yeah, I agree. And then another tournament option, Miguel Montero has homered in 3 games in a row.
Yep.
You're obviously not chasing that power streak, but I mean, when he gets going, he's a very good hitter for a cheap price. So, and Jake Peavy obviously not a very good pitcher right now. First base options, I'm not paying top dollar for Joey Votto lefty-lefty matchup. If he was about $1,000 cheaper, maybe. But it's not a terrible matchup for him, but I just don't feel like I'm going to pay that. If I'm going to pay up that type of price, I'm going to go with Miguel Cabrera against Hector Santiago, fly ball pitcher at home. Other options, I'm going to be looking to pay down a little bit here with these guys. Albert Pujols homered last night. We mentioned Verlander's been very good, but $3,900 for a guy who does have 4 homers in his last 9 games, I feel like makes him a really good tournament option. But it's going to be tough to pay down here in cash games because there are a lot of top-notch options here still.
Yeah, definitely. Couple other guys I'd look at. Edwin Encarnacion against Colby Lewis in Texas is a fine play. I know the Blue Jays weren't elite last night like we were hoping they would be against lefties. Encarnacion still has a ton of power against righties, though. Brandon Belt against Hendricks at $4,000 is a pretty solid play. He's been great against righties lately. Hendricks has really been struggling compared to what he looked like in the beginning of the season. Justin Smoke's only $2,500 is a really cheap guy for Toronto in Texas against Colby Lewis, a lot like Encarnacion, just a lot cheaper exposure to those same factors. And then as a GPP play, I think Ryan Howard against Bartolo Colon's a fine one.
Yeah, I like that. And then once again, Victor Martinez finally gets a lefty. Been hitting lefties much better than righties. $3,400 for him. I think he's an okay option. And then one other guy I'll throw out there is Adam Lind against the righty Anderson at $3,600. Hasn't been great, but we know he's got a long track record of success against righties, so I'm a believer still. Second base options, I'm playing Jason Kipnis again. I don't see any way not to. Jimmy Nelson struggles big time with lefties. Kipnis broke out last night, had a monster game, 25 fantasy points on DraftKings. So for me, he's a little bit pricey, but that's the guy that I want. You can consider some of these other guys, but you got $100 more for Daniel Murphy, which I think is a fine play. And then your boy, Ben Zobrist there, $4,100. I'm sure you're a big fan of his tonight.
Yeah, I always like him from the right side of the plate for the power upside. Justin Turner's another guy I liked quite a bit last night. He homered off a lefty last night, faces another one tonight in Cincinnati. Still, his WOBA numbers are pretty low against lefties on the season, but they're rising really quick here. He's been red hot against lefties, 308 WOBA against him, 187 ISO now. He's hit about half his home runs on the season against lefties. He's only 3,700 still. He's been down ever since he came back from that DL stint. So I'm going to keep playing him a ton at both second base and third base. Basically, anytime Dodgers play a pretty weak pitcher. I mean, he's been rock solid all year against both righties and lefties now. And then if you're looking for someone cheap, uh, Kiki Hernandez, again, only 2,600 facing another lefty. He hit eighth in the lineup last night. I'm not super excited about that again tonight, but for his upside and how cheap he is, it's hard to ignore him even if he's in the 8 hole.
Yeah, I agree there. And a couple other cheap guys you can consider. Scooter Jeanette at $2,800, probably batting sixth. He's an okay option. Cesar Hernandez at $2,900 against Bartolo Colon. I think is a nice spot for him. Finally, we get to play him at a cheap price, and it's not against an elite pitcher, so I like that also.
Yeah, last guy I'll mention, Chris Coglin's only 3,000 again, same spot as last night, basically against a little bit better pitcher, but hitting the third spot for the Cubs is, a really great spot to be in right now. Second base eligibility is getting him in a lot more of my lineups than he was when he was only outfield eligible.
Yeah, a lot of great hitters hitting around him as well, like you said. So third base options, Donaldson's still really expensive. Did a whole lot of nothing last night, but he's always in play, especially at a ballpark like Texas against a pitcher like Colby Lewis, who's prone to implosions. But I think you're still looking at a guy like Todd Frazier. Finally had a solid game last night, 4,400 now against Brett Anderson, who I believe to be a barely above average lefty. He's nothing special, but I like that spot for him. And then I like Chris Bryant a lot as well against Jake Peavy. I mean, Bryant's been absolutely locked in recently.
Yeah, definitely. I like all those guys. That's my top options for sure. Cabrera, I love at third base. If you're playing someone else at first base, I think he's probably the top third base option. Yep. I agree on Cabrera or on Frazier also. I love him at home against a lefty anytime. He looked good again last night finally. So I'm pretty confident in him again, and his price is underpriced, if anything, at this point. Carlos Santana is another Cleveland guy that had a nice game last night, faces Jimmy Nelson tonight, has some GPP upside. You mentioned Daniel Murphy at second base. I don't mind him at third base either. Ramos Ramirez facing a lefty again. Narvison's allowed a 370 ISO to righties on the year, which it's a really small sample size, but Ramos has shown he can still hit lefties pretty well. And then if you're looking for someone cheap, there's not a ton I like cheap today at third base, but Casey McGee against the lefty again in lock. He's flat 2,000, probably going to hit sixth. That'd probably be the way I would go there. Maybe Lonnie Chisenhall if he's in the fifth spot for 3,000. That's probably my two cheap guys right there.
Yeah, absolutely. You know I'm on board with Lonnie Chisenhall all the time. And Jed Jerko, $2,400, does hit lefties really well with some power. You're certainly not expecting 2 homers like he had last night, but Gio Gonzalez also does have some struggles with righties, so I think at 24 he's an okay GPP option. Shortstop options, we'll just go ahead and get the easy ones out of the way first. Johnny Peralta against the lefty again, $3,800. Eugenio Suarez has been killing lefties. He's 4K, a lot more than I'd like to pay for him, but I still think he's a fine GPP option. And, of course, Troy Tulowitzki against Colby Lewis. If you could pay up for him, I think he's he may not be your top play, but I think he's your highest upside play.
Yeah, I agree. I like both the Dodgers shortstop eligible guys, Jimmy Rollins and Kiki Hernandez against Holmberg. Rollins has looked really, really good lately. I mean, his WOBA against lefties is up to 362 with a 148 ISO. I mean, Rollins looks like he's rock solid right now. He's only 3,300 still. I mentioned Kiki Hernandez is only 2,600 still. So, I mean, keep an eye on the Dodgers lineup against the lefty as usual.
Utley. Since Chase Utley came back, he's been killing the ball.
Yeah, that's what it is. He loves playing next to him. That's it. Not a ton else I really like at shortstop today. I'm probably sticking to Tulo, Peralta. I mean, maybe Suarez. I don't mind Francisco Lindor, I guess, but he feels overpriced unless you're stacking the Indians again. Otherwise, I'd be looking at those cheaper guys like Rollins and Hernandez.
Yep. Yeah, completely agree there. And then as we move to the outfield, you get A.J. Pollock as the most expensive option. I mean, he's an okay tournament option, but the guys I'm looking at for the most part, if I'm paying up, going to be Jose Bautista. Yoenis Cespedes has been on fire right now. Homered again last night. It gives him 2 in his last 2 games, 5 in his last 5 if you want to count all 3 from one game. But he's absolutely been locked in, hitting for the power that we expect him to hit for all season long. But I think my favorite of these top guys, when you consider some price, is Andrew McCutchen against Narvison. You already mentioned his struggles against righties. I mean, $4,900 for McCutchen. He's been really consistent recently.
Yeah, I like Starling Marte, too, in that same mold. And even, we didn't mention Jung Ho Kong very much in the infield, but I don't mind him as a GPP play either in that same matchup. Jose Bautista in Texas hit a home run last night. I think he's a fine GPP play again. David Peralta for Arizona is pretty interesting, assuming he's going to be in the 4 hole against a righty and Lackey. He's only 3,300. It feels like he's priced like he's facing an ace, and I don't really consider Lackey that type of pitcher anymore, so that seems like a decent value to me. I'm going to keep naming him every day. Another guy that sits at 2,000, Jason Bourgeois, against another lefty for Cincinnati. He had a fine cash game last night for 2,000. I'm going to keep playing him until his price goes up and he's not hitting first in the lineup. Yeah. Probably a better version of him, Rajai Davis. He's 3,300, so quite a bit more, but he's facing a lefty in Santiago, probably going to lead off today also.
Yeah, and then you got a couple other guys, your platoon guys. Johnny Gomes once again gets a lefty, $2,400. Gotta like him. Yasiel Puig seems way too cheap as well, $3,600 against Holmberg.
Another Dodger, Scott Van Slyke's only 2,800 against a lefty still. He had a decent game last night. I mean, you can get two really strong pitchers in there today with a lot of good cash game value plays. So that's a pretty good way to construct your lineup today using some of these value outfielders.
Yeah. Michael Kadire is another guy I'll throw out there. He wasn't in the lineup last night, but did have a pinch hit, 2-run hit, $3,400, I think. I won't be playing him at first base outside of a stack maybe, but I think at $3,400 against the rookie pitcher, I think he's in a fine spot too.
Yeah, one other GPP play I like a decent amount, Denard Span, assuming he's in the lineup. He returned yesterday. He's facing Ross. If he gets on base today, I mean, that's pretty guaranteed steal, at least one there. So I think there's some nice upside with him. He'll be lower owned because he is just recently coming off that injury. And Ross isn't a guy people like actively target very often, but I think he's a pretty solid GPP play for his ownership percentage tonight. And then the last guy I have on here, actually I have two more. Lorenzo Cain against the lefty and Chen. Yep. Cain always under-owned, like almost all of the Kansas City guys are when he's in a great matchup. Just absolutely crushing lefties on the year still. 412 WOBA, 224 ISO. And then Curtis Granderson, who looked pretty good leading off last night against Philly. You mentioned Eichhoff has some good stuff, but I mean, I consider him a pretty average righty at best. 8.5 run total. Granderson with a 392 WOBA and a 237 ISO against righties on the year. I mean, he's in a really good spot leading off. Probably get 5 at bats in this one.
Yep, I'm with you there. And that's going to wrap things up. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out all of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.